Good morning, Mike. What will we be doing today?
Good morning, Angela. Today we're going to talk about main shafts. We're going to talk about main shafts, the likes of which you would find in a twin countershaft transmission. Like this one. This one is actually removed from the transmission, held in the vise, not real stable because I don't want to damage the end of the main shaft. Okay, I want to take this apart and I want to show you guys how it comes apart, what to look for, and how to put it back together again so that it'll work. Here at the top, we've got our auxiliary drive gear. If you remember, the auxiliary drive gear is the last piece on the main shaft. This piece is actually in the auxiliary section of the transmission, bolted on with this plate. Easy enough to get off. There's a little retaining ring up in here that we need to remove. And you'll notice when I remove this retaining ring, I've got my fingers on the top of it so that it doesn't pop out and fly away. This should come right off. I have my output bearing on the back side, I have my mounting plate, my auxiliary drive gear. I'm going to put that right there. The next thing I see is another retaining ring. This one has to come off too. Notice these are retaining rings and not snap rings. Snap rings are different. Snap rings have holes in the end. Retaining rings do not. Retaining rings only go on the outside of a shaft. Retaining ring. I'm going to put that right there because that's where it goes. The next thing I'm going to see is the reverse driven gear. To get this off, we just pick it up. We're going to put it down right there because that's the next thing that came off. The next thing that comes off is called a spacer. This spacer fits with that gear. You'll see the spacer has teeth on the outside. You'll see the driven gear has teeth on the inside. That is exactly how they go together. And that is what centers the gear on the shaft. That comes off and goes in there. Now, the next part is called a spacer. This is a washer. This is a spacer. This is what actually fixes the position of the gear on the main shaft. This is held in place with this little pin, like this one. It's called a spline. It's called a pin. Lots of people call it different things. It comes all the way down to the bottom. You're going to make me find it again. And it comes off. It does come out, doesn't it? Yes. There we go. Up, up, up. Sometimes they come off easy. Sometimes we need a little help. It just comes up. It just comes up. And it comes out. So, this spacer has teeth on the inside of it, and it fits into this wide notch on the main shaft, and then I turn it, and then I put this key down in the hold on. I'm going to put that key down in there so that it holds it to stop it from turning. When I pull this out, each one of these gears has a similar washer, spacer. So right now, if I move these gears, the spacers in there would move and this would all fall out. You need to be careful of that. That spacer with that gear on that washer. The next thing that comes off, my sliding collar. The next thing that comes off is the washer, the spacer that's down in there. Now that spacer has been turned. I need to turn this spacer to get it out. And when the spline's like it comes off, washer's still in the gear. That's my first gear. We'll leave that right there. The next thing that comes off is second gear. Second gear washer, second gear spacer. Next thing that comes off is 2-3 sliding collar. Next thing that comes off is fourth driven gear with the washer and the spacer. That goes right there. The last thing that comes off is fourth driven gear, spacer, the washer rather, spacer, and sliding collar. Okay. Down on the bottom of this main shaft, there's a little roll pin. Be very careful when you're working on this roll pin. This roll pin is what stops this key from sliding forward when the shaft is assembled. If this breaks, this pin can fall forwards. These washers will come unlocked and the gears will be able to move back and forth. When these gears start to move around, things break. It's not a good thing. This groove right here, if you recall, had a lock ring in it. When you assemble this, we're going to put a lock ring back into this groove. That's going to keep this pin from sliding up. If this pin slides up, these gears down here can come loose and fall off. Both of those scenarios are not good. We got this all apart. What I want to look for now, what I want to inspect for, primarily is if this shaft is twisted. All of these splines should be pretty straight. Easy way to check them to see if it's straight is just take the sliding collar, go up and down. If this was twisted, the sliding collar wouldn't go up and down, it would bind. Right now, we're pretty straight. This portion of the main shaft is a finished portion. This is what goes into the input shaft. This is where my pocket bushing is, or my pocket bearing, excuse me. This bushing centers this end of the main shaft on the input shaft. We're looking for something that's smooth and polished, a lot like this one. If I see a lot of pitting, if I see damage or corrosion to this part of the shaft, I'm going to have to replace the shaft. So it's not bent, it's not damaged. There's some minor chipping down here. This thing has been apart more times than I can count. It might have fallen on the floor a time or two. It's still in good shape. There might be some minor damage to the end there. We're not overly concerned with it. Okay. The other thing I want to mention is on these sliding collars, you'll see a series of splines on the inside, but you'll see one spline is missing. There's a missing tooth here. The missing tooth goes over the key. When I have this assembled and my key is sitting in that groove, the missing tooth and the sliding collar will fit over that key and allow me to slide back and forth. Missing tooth, key, here we go. Okay, so what do you say we put it together?
Let's
put it back together.
And you put it in somewhat orderly fashion when you took it apart.
You know, over the years I've learned that there's more than one piece. It has to go back the same way. This is a really great way to keep things organized.
Right.
Putting it back together, I just start at this end and I work together. I work backwards and put it right back together again. I don't have to put this on right now because this end of the shaft is going to be exposed when I take it out of the vise. But let's do it anyways. Let's go ahead and slide that on. The next thing that goes on is my fourth driven gear, but I can't put that on until I have the washer installed. Some of these washers are going to have a square tooth in them. Not to worry about the square tooth. We'll put that on the opposite side as the key. Makes it a little bit easier to get a pick in there to turn it. One of the things about these spacers is These are actually shims. These are going to come in different thicknesses. If you were a transmission shop, you would have a large assortment of spacers, and they each have different thicknesses. This is the piece that determines the distance between the two gears. We're going to measure these when we put it back together again, to make sure that I have sufficient side clearance between the two gears. You'll notice that one side is flat and one side is convex. One side is flat, one side sticks up. You'll notice the sliding collar has concave edge to it. It's kind of coned in. This one's coned out, this one's coned in. We can remember this easily. That's how they fit together. If you was to flood this with lubricating oil, as what you would find inside the transmission, you would find a little bit of synchronizer going on there. Not a lot, but a little bit. Let's put that on. Let's put this on all the way down there into that groove, and then I'm going to turn it. Now that is locked to the shaft. I'm going to check that. I'm going to put my pin in there and make sure that it stays. Then I'm going to put my spacer on. Some of these spacers are flat on both sides. This one has a shoulder on one side. If it was flat on both sides, I probably wouldn't care which way it goes in. But because I have a shoulder on one side, I need to be careful of this. The flat side of this is going to go on the flat side of the shim, for the washer. That spacer then is going to hold the gear in place on this retaining ring inside the board. That just goes like that. That gear is on. The next thing that goes on is the next gear. This would be, if this is fourth gear, this would be third gear. Third gear has a machine surface that fits on the machine surface on fourth gear. Down it goes. A little bit of oil on that. Not a lot, not going to take much. A little bit of oil on that, lube it up. Then I'm going to take, which one am I going to take? I'm going to take washer. I'm going to stick it down inside the gear, and that washer is going to center the gear on the shaft. Then I'm going to take my spacer, I'm going to put it down on the shaft. This one goes flat side down because the washer is down there. Slide it down, up, slide it. Oh, can't go down because I dropped it.
Front row.
I just can't go down because my key came out. The key has to come out. Then I have to pick up my dropped piece, and I'm gonna clean it off because there's some dirt on the floor that I don't want stuck inside my transmission. A little drop of oil down in there. Back in we go. Oh, see, that's what happens when you do that.
What happened?
It all fell apart. I told you that was going to happen. We're going to lift up this washer. We're going to put it back where it goes. We're going to put our key back in it. We're going to drop that again. We're going to wipe it off again. I learned to do this. It's taken me a year to perfect this. Gear goes on. Washer spaces it on the gear. Next gear goes on. Washer centers it on the gear. But before I do, did I put that back in? I did. Now I can move these gears and they won't fall off. But I have to remove this. I have to remove this spline in order to get this spacer on. So I want to be careful when I do this. I'm going to drop that down there. I'm going to grab my pick. I'm going to turn that spacer. Then I'm going to put this back in, just temporary, so that those washers don't move and the spacers don't move. Next one up is, because I have clutching teeth up, sliding collar. Sliding collar goes, missing tooth over the spine, and there we go. Locked in gear. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the second driven gear on. But before I do that, I need to lock my spacer to the main shaft, which means that the key has to come back out. And when I take the key back out, if I can get the key back out, I don't want to move any of the other gears on this shaft. If I move any of the other gears on this shaft, it'll fall down. Because I have my sliding collar here, I have my concave surface, I have my convex surface on my washer, spacer, excuse me, and I'm turning it so that the splines don't line up anymore. Now, I'm going to put my key back in so that nothing moves. Put my washer on, centers the gear on the shaft, and that just gets dropped on. Next thing up would be my first gear. First driven gear goes on, face up, clutching teeth up. Washer goes down inside to center the gear on the shaft. Spacer goes in, flat side down this time, convex side up. I have my clutching teeth here. All the way down, but I can't do that until I take this out. It's not something you're going to be able to forget to do. Because if you forget to take this out, you won't be able to get the shaft together.
Being careful not to move anything.
Being very careful not to move anything that I don't want to have fall down. And it does fall down. A lot of students get really frustrated because they get to the end of this and they make one false move and the whole thing falls down. And it's frustrating. It's happened to me many times. We just learn to be careful. And we get extra practice at putting the gears together. Okay. Push that down all the way up against the roll pin down here. The next thing that's going to go on, the next piece that came off, my sliding collar, missing tooth, goes over the spline. You can engage that into clutching teeth there. Now, reverse gear is the last one that's going to go on, which means that now the washer goes, the spacer goes on, which means you come back up. Back up you come. Some of them come out really easy. And because everything is put together on the shaft now, I want to be really careful. This is the time to be really careful and not wiggle a bunch of stuff when you're doing this. Turn that slightly to line up the splines, and back in we go. All the way down. Look at that, we did it. Washer goes on top. Faces the gear on the main shaft, and we have, at this point, a relatively functional main shaft. I have a sliding collar here that I can engage in first or reverse. I have another sliding collar here that I can engage second or third. My fourth sliding collar is down here, fourth and fifth. Up here, this is a little different. I don't have any more washers. I don't have any more spacers to put on this. My spline should come up to that snap ring groove, and it's up against the roll pin down here at the other end. I need to put this on it so that it doesn't come off, it doesn't move. And I want to be careful about working with snap rings, because if it slips out of my tool, it can go flying across the room, hit somebody.
Good thing we'll all be wearing iPro.
We all wear an iPro. Now, if you see that spline right there, is right up against the snap ring here, and down here at the bottom, it's up against the roll pin, so that spline can't move anywhere, it can't go anywhere. All of these gears now can rotate, or stay stationary, as the case may be, because the shims are all locked to the main shaft. This, my auxiliary drive gear, goes on the top. And then I have the last retaining ring, goes in a groove, the last groove on the end of the main shaft. As this comes out, as this is how it sits into the transmission. When you take it out of the transmission, or when you're putting it into the transmission, this is what it looks like. We can't put the transmission, we cannot put this back in the case with the auxiliary gear on it. We also can't put this back in the case with this gear where it is. To reinstall this gear, what I need to do is remove this snap ring. This comes out fairly easily, shouldn't be too much struggle getting this out. Notice my fingers got a hold of that snap ring so that it does come out. It doesn't go flying across the room. And because this is my reverse gear, and notice my reverse gear because of these two recesses right here, this gear will go on, but only this way is right. These two recesses point to the back of the auxiliary drive gear. This goes on over the spacers, over the sliding collar, over everything. When I put this shaft back into the case, the reverse gear has to be up against the first gear. There won't be enough room in the case to get it in or out. When you're putting this into the transmission, you have to make sure that this gear stays up against the first driven gear. Otherwise, it'll get stuck. There's not enough room inside the transmission case to move all these things around. All this stuff here will stay, it won't come off, it won't get in the way of anything. After I have this installed in the case, then I'll reach through the top of the case, pull this back up, then I can put the lock ring in the groove, and that'll set the gear where it belongs. That will lock the reverse driven gear in place. Okay. One more thing. There's always one more thing. There's never one less thing. Nobody ever says you've done too much. The clearance inside of here, because these two gears are running past each other, and so are these two gears, we need to set the clearance for this. We need to mark the distance between these two teeth, or these two gears, and the distance between these two gears. But we need to measure it up here in the middle of the gear where they're riding on each other. Typical clearance values for these are somewhere between 5 and 12 thousandths of an inch. I'm going to get my 12 thousandths of an inch feeler gauge, and I'm going to...
Can you hold that up for me to see it?
12 thousandths feeler gauge. I'm going to pull these gears apart. I have to separate these gears. When I put this in, I'm going to slide it all the way in up to this surface here. I'm not going to measure it out here. I don't want to measure that. I need to measure it all the way up in here. So I'm going to pull these apart, and I'm going to try to get that in there. Sometimes, there it goes. Now, that's not enough. That's not good enough. I need to measure the other side too. I'm going to get my super duper long 12 thousandths feeler gauge. And I'm going to put it in on the other side. I'm going to put it in on the other side, and I'm going to pull those gears apart so that I can get that in there. So this pushed in all the way, and I am measuring the gears clearance here This is pushed in all the way. I'm measuring it over here. If I can move this up and down, and I can, then there's too much room between these two gears. They're too far apart. There's too much clearance. What I need to do is find a thicker shim to put in there that will space those gears a little bit closer together. The washers, the flat washers, they won't space anything. It's this guy here, the shim, that will make the gears further or closer together. The reverse gear, I can't measure the side clearance on that until I put it in. The measurement on the reverse gear is going to be at least 5/1000 of an inch of clearance, but I can't measure that until it's in the transmission and the auxiliary drive gear is bolted to the back of the case. Questions, comments? It's really not that difficult. Once you've done one or two of them, you'll fall right into it and you'll be able to fix all the transmissions that you ever see.
Will the students be doing this on their own in the lab or with your assistants?
If we get far enough, the students will be doing this in the lab, yes. The expectation is they'll all be able to do this.
And they can always play your video on their phone as they go along.
The video is there for students to use. I came in and we made the video. I want the students to use them.
Yeah, use it in the lab.
If they have any questions or comments, they can contact me, they can ask me, they can email me. I'm more than happy to answer their questions about main shafts.
Done?
Thanks, guys.
Bye.